Turn the lights down and get comfortable. Tonight's story begins in the dark. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what kind of stories keep you up at night.
I first heard about the rancher through a low, wavering call that slid across the radio like wind through hollow wire, his voice soft and strained, almost swallowed by the slow hiss between signals. He said his livestock were thinning, not taken in any way that made sense, not scattered, not claimed by claw or illness, just less, as if the herd itself was sighing away in the night. I have walked these woods for 12 seasons, long enough to learn their slow language, the sway of spruce, the silver hush of birch leaves when the weather shifts. I know the weight of wolf silence and the loose shuffle of elk along the lower marsh. This felt different even before I reached his land. The air seemed to settle heavier along the trail, like a held breath that would not release. His ranch rests deep in the interior, where the forest folds inward and light thins into a pale wash by late afternoon. The fences are old cedar, silvered and smooth, stretching along a clearing that feels shaved from the trees rather than grown from the soil. I could smell something faint when I stepped from my truck, not rot, not decay, but a thin ozone tang, sharp and misplaced, like air after distant lightning. The sky was clear. He met me near the barn, his eyes rimmed red, voice low and level in that strained way people use when they are holding something inside. He showed me the herd. They stood still, too still, even the calves, their ears angled toward the tree line as if listening to a soft whistle only they could hear. He told me he sometimes heard movement along the fence line after sundown, not hooves, not paws, a sliding sound, like wet canvas pulled slowly across wood. Once, he said, he heard his own voice call from the pasture while he was inside washing his hands. Same tone, same slow drawl, flat, no warmth. I smiled in the way I am trained to smile, soft reassurance settling on my lips, while something older stirred low in my spine. Mimicry happens in these woods. Ravens borrow sound. Wind folds voices. There are explanations. There are always explanations. Still, as I walked the perimeter, the trees seemed to lean subtly inward, their pale trunks narrowing the world. The fence wire hummed under my fingers, though there was no wind to move it. The hum was low and steady, almost like breath drawn through teeth. I found tracks near the northern edge of the clearing. At first, I thought they were deer prints distorted by melt and freeze, but the spacing was wrong, too narrow at the heel, too elongated at the front, as if the weight settled forward unnaturally. I crouched to study them, and the soil felt strangely warm against my palm despite the cooling air. Behind me, from the direction of the barn, I heard a soft zippering sound. Slow, measured, deliberate. I turned, expecting canvas or tack shifting in the breeze, but everything stood silent. The rancher remained by the barn door, hands slack at his sides, watching me. Then, from somewhere along the fence line to my left, farther than his voice could carry, I heard him call my name, perfectly, flat. And when I looked back at the barn, he had not opened his mouth.
I did not answer the voice along the fence. I let the silence swell instead, long and slow, as if the land itself were leaning closer to listen to what I would do. The rancher remained near the barn, pale under the weak wash of evening light, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. I could feel the thin prickle along my arms, that low animal unease I usually smooth away with reason. Ravens echo words. Wind bends sound. Distance distorts direction. I have said those lines to hikers with wide eyes. I tried to say them to myself. The fence wire beneath my hand gave another faint hum, softer now, like breath through hollow reeds. I stepped toward the place where the voice had risen. Each stride felt heavier than it should have, as though the soil resisted my weight. The herd shifted behind me in a single slow ripple, all heads turning toward the same stretch of tree line. There were no birds, no wind, only that held, hovering stillness. I reached the northern posts again and crouched, scanning the earth. The elongated tracks had deepened. They were fresher now. The soil along their edges looked slightly glazed, as if pressed by something warm and pliant rather than bone and hoof. I traced the outline gently, and my fingers came away faintly damp, though the ground was otherwise dry. A faint mineral scent lingered on my skin, metallic and wrong. Then I heard the zippering again, closer, not from the barn this time, from the woods ahead. It was followed by a low, rhythmic tapping, wood against wood, evenly spaced. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The pattern repeated with patient precision, like someone learning how to knock. I rose slowly and rested my hand near the radio on my vest, not calling yet, only grounding myself in the weight of it. The rancher had told me the disturbances always began at dusk. He had not mentioned patterns. The tapping stopped. The silence thickened. And then, between 2 pale spruce trunks, I saw movement. It was slight, almost subtle enough to ignore. A vertical shape easing behind bark. Too tall for deer, too narrow for bear. I told myself it was a trick of dim light and overlapping trunks. I've spent years teaching others not to let shadow become story. But the shape slid again, not stepping, sliding, as if its joints did not lift. I felt the temperature drop in a sudden soft wave, cool air brushing the inside of my sleeves. My breath fogged faintly, though it had not moments before. The smell shifted too, less ozone now, more like wet leaves sealed too long without air. From behind me, the rancher's voice drifted again. "Ranger." It came from the pasture this time. I turned sharply. The rancher still stood by the barn. He had not moved. When I looked back to the trees, the vertical shape was gone. But the tracks at my feet were no longer leading into the woods. They were facing me, and the soil between each impression had been smoothed flat, as if something had slowly, carefully repositioned itself while I was looking elsewhere. I did not move for a long moment after I saw the tracks had turned toward me. I let my breathing slow, let the soft rhythm of it settle into the hush around the clearing, because sudden motion felt like an invitation. The soil between those elongated impressions was too smooth, almost leveled, as if something had carefully erased the story of how it shifted. I crouched again, slow and deliberate, pressing my palm to the earth. The warmth was gone now. The ground felt cool, faintly damp, and there was a smell rising from it, thin, sour, like leaves sealed in a low cellar. I told myself animals circle, they reassess, they double back, but no animal I know rotates its weight without leaving a pivot mark. These prints had simply realigned. Behind me, the herd gave a collective exhale, a soft wave of breath moving through wool and hide. I heard the low shuffle of hooves settling deeper into soil. When I stood, I did not look directly into the tree line at first. I let my gaze soften, scanning the periphery the way I was trained to do. That is when I saw it again, just at the edge of vision, a pale length between trunks. It seemed almost luminous in the thinning light, too vertical, too still. My mind tried to reduce it to bark, to a stripped branch leaning at an angle, but there was a slight sway that did not match the trees around it. The air felt thinner suddenly, like the clearing had risen higher in elevation without warning. My ears filled with a faint pressure,
a low internal hum that made it difficult to separate external sound from the inside of my own skull. I lifted my radio. "Visual anomaly near North Line," I said evenly, hearing how steady I sounded. I did not mention the voice mimicry. I did not mention the sliding movement. Protocol requires observation first. The rancher called to me then, his real voice cracking slightly. "You see it?" I did not answer him, because as he spoke, the pale vertical shape leaned, not forward, not back, sideways, as if its joints were arranged on a different logic. The movement was smooth, wrong in its geometry, more like a frame shifting in a film than muscle beneath hide. It leaned until it vanished behind one narrow spruce, though it had been far wider than the trunk could conceal. I blinked once. The space where it had stood looked empty, entirely empty. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, pressing into my ears. Then, from directly behind me, very close to my shoulder, I heard the slow zippering sound again. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate, measured, and impossibly near. I turned in one clean motion. There was nothing there, only the fence, only the pasture, only the rancher staring at me with wide, hollow eyes. And over his shoulder, near the barn wall, I saw a second version of him standing still in the shadow, facing me with the same expression, though its jaw hung slightly lower than it should.
I did not react to the second figure. I have learned that sudden fear feeds whatever waits beyond reason, so I let my shoulders stay loose, let my face remain level, even as something deep and ancient inside me began to coil. The rancher stood near the barn door, pale and breathing hard. The other one stood a few yards to his left, half within shadow, its outline softened by dusk. At first glance they were identical. Same hat, same lean frame, same slow rise and fall of the chest. But the shadowed one did not sway with the breeze. The hem of its flannel hung still, while the real fabric along the rancher's arms stirred lightly. That stillness felt louder than any scream. I stepped sideways, subtly shifting my angle. The second figure's head followed me, not in a smooth arc, but in a slight stutter, like motion skipping between frames. Just once, then stillness again. My throat felt dry, and there was a faint bitterness on my tongue, like I had held a coin there too long. "Sir," I said carefully, never taking my eyes off the shadowed version, "walk toward me." The real rancher hesitated, confusion passing over his face. "What?" "Walk." He stepped forward, boots grinding softly in gravel. The second figure did not move. It remained near the barn, watching me, watching only me. As the rancher advanced, the distance between the two versions widened. I expected the other to fade, to dissolve back into shadow. It did not. Instead, it tilted its head slowly to the side. Too far. The angle exceeded comfort, exceeded ligament and bone. The jaw slackened further, revealing darkness inside where teeth should have caught the light. No sound came from it. The silence felt swollen, like the air itself was bruised. Then I heard a soft whistling drift from the pasture. Not wind, not an animal. A low, wavering note that rose and fell without breath behind it. The herd reacted instantly. Every animal shifted at once, pressing toward the southern fence as if something invisible had entered among them. Their hooves shuffled in anxious rhythm, stirring dust that carried a faint musky odor, sharp and unsettled. I felt the temperature shift again, but this time it warmed, a thin wave of unnatural heat brushing my face as though I had stepped near an unseen engine. My skin prickled. I glanced back toward the barn. The second figure was closer now. It had not walked. It had simply
lessened the space between us. The gravel beneath it remained undisturbed, no footprints, no compression. The rancher reached my side, breathing unevenly. "What are you looking at?" he whispered. I did not answer, because as he spoke, the thing near the barn opened its mouth wider, and from it came his voice again. Perfect tone, perfect cadence. "Ranger," it said softly. But this time the sound did not travel through the air. I felt it vibrate faintly in my chest, as if spoken from within my own lungs.
The sound inside my chest lingered long after the false voice ended, a faint vibration beneath my ribs that did not belong to breath or heartbeat. I pressed my palm briefly against my sternum as if I could steady it, as if I could reassure myself that the tremor was only adrenaline. The real rancher stood close now, close enough that I could hear the uneven slide of air in his throat. He followed my gaze toward the barn and frowned. "There's nothing there," he said softly. I did not correct him, because the second shape was no longer by the wall. The space where it had stood was empty, washed in the dim blue of evening. The barn boards creaked faintly as they cooled, releasing the stored warmth of the day. A sweet, stale hay scent drifted from within, grounding and ordinary. I wanted that ordinary. I let my eyes move slowly, deliberately, scanning roofline, fence posts, the pasture beyond. The herd had stilled again, but their formation had changed. They were no longer pressed south. They had arranged themselves in a loose semicircle facing the barn. Facing us. No, facing behind us. My skin tightened. I did not turn immediately. Instead, I listened. There it was again, that soft, zippering sound, slow and careful, directly at my back, close enough that I felt the faintest brush of displaced air along my neck. I pivoted in one smooth motion, hand near my sidearm, but not drawing. The pasture lay open and silvered in dusk. The fence hummed lightly under the settling air. Nothing stood there, nothing moved, and yet the smell had changed. The clean hay scent was gone, replaced by something damp and mineral, like stone submerged too long in still water. The rancher shifted beside me. "Ranger?" he asked, voice thin. Then, from inside the barn came the low, rhythmic tapping again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Wood against wood, deliberate and even. It did not echo like natural movement. It carried a hollow resonance, as though produced from within a larger cavity than the barn could contain. I motioned for him to stay back and began walking toward the wide sliding door. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground resisted my approach. My mind searched for explanation. Loose beam, livestock shifting in stall, thermal contraction in old boards. There are reasons for tapping. There are always reasons. But as I reached the threshold, the air spilling from inside felt markedly colder than the evening around us. A soft draft brushed my face, carrying a faint coppery scent that did not belong to hay or soil. I paused at the doorway and let my eyes adjust. The interior lay dim and layered in shadow. Stalls lined either side. Tools hung neatly along the far wall. Everything appeared undisturbed, and yet the silence inside felt different from the silence outside. It felt occupied. Then, slowly from the farthest stall, I saw movement. Not rising, not stepping. Something elongated, easing upward from the floor, as if unfolding from too many joints. Pale, narrow, its limbs bent inward at angles that did not follow bone. It did not rush me. It did not lunge. It simply continued to stand, taller and taller, until its head brushed the low rafters without bending. And when its face tilted toward me, I saw that it was wearing the rancher's features. Soft, familiar, wrong. I did not step back when it reached its full height.
I felt the urge, a sharp animal swell in my spine, urging retreat, but I held my ground at the threshold and let my breathing settle into something slow and shallow. The shape inside the stall remained still, its elongated frame brushing the rafters with a faint scraping whisper. The boards above it trembled lightly, releasing a sift of pale dust that drifted down in lazy spirals. The air within the barn felt colder than before, dense and damp against my skin, and beneath the hay I could smell that thin, coppery wetness again, faint but unmistakable. The face it wore was nearly perfect, nearly. The eyes sat slightly too wide apart, as though spaced by a careless hand. The jaw hung loose, slack in a way no living muscle would allow, and when it blinked, both lids closed from bottom to top, slow, deliberate. I felt something inside me lean toward explanation, stress hallucination, low light distortion. But the rancher stood behind me, and I could hear his breath falter. That's me," he whispered, voice thinning into disbelief. The thing's head tilted at the sound. Too far again. I heard a faint internal clicking as it adjusted, a soft series of wet, jointed ticks that did not belong to bone. Then it lowered itself, not by bending knees, but by folding inward, collapsing in sections like a frame losing tension. It sank until its elongated limbs pressed against the stall walls, reshaping its posture into something closer to human height. Closer, but still wrong. The tapping resumed, this time from within its chest. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The sound did not match the movement of its limbs. Its arms hung slack at its sides. The tapping seemed to originate deeper, as if something hollow inside it struck against its own ribs. I felt the temperature drop again, sharper now, enough that my breath showed faintly in the dim light. My radio crackled at my shoulder with a brief hiss of static, then silence, no signal. I did not recall losing reception here before. The rancher shifted behind me, boots scuffing gravel. The sound seemed too loud. The thing's eyes slid toward him instantly, not turning the head this time. The eyes moved alone, gliding sideways within the sockets until only the whites faced me. Then, without warning, it straightened fully in a single fluid motion, no gradual unfolding, one smooth rise. The rafters did not scrape this time. They seemed higher. I blinked. The barn ceiling appeared unchanged, and yet the distance between its head and the beams had grown. The space felt stretched, subtly elongated, as though the interior dimensions had softened. A warm draft brushed my back from outside, carrying the scent of dust and livestock, grounding and real. I clung to that scent. The thing opened its mouth slowly. No teeth showed, only darkness. And from that darkness came the rancher's voice again, perfectly calm. "You should leave," it said, softly. But this time, the real rancher did not react. He did not gasp. He did not speak. Because when I glanced back at him, his mouth was in the exact same shape, silently forming the same words. For a suspended second, I could not tell which mouth had shaped the warning first. The rancher stood inches behind me, lips parted, jaw lowered at that same unnatural angle, though no sound moved through his throat. Inside the stall, the taller version mirrored him with patient stillness, its hollow mouth holding the last vibration of the words. "You should leave." The air felt viscous, slow to move through my lungs, and I realized I had stopped breathing. I drew in a careful breath and tasted dust and old wood, grounding myself in something ordinary. The rancher blinked rapidly, as if waking. His jaw lifted, confusion sliding across his face. "I didn't say that," he whispered. I believed him.
because the taller thing's mouth had not fully closed. It remained slightly open, like an unfinished sentence. The tapping resumed, but not from its chest this time. It came from above. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Directly over my head. I looked up. The rafters appeared unchanged, yet the sound was clearer now, as if the space above the ceiling had grown shallow. A fine stream of pale sawdust drifted down in a thin line, settling against my sleeve. I felt a subtle warmth from the wood beams, inconsistent with the cold air pooling near the floor. My mind tried to steady itself. Thermal inversion, settling timber, structural shift. The explanations felt fragile. The elongated figure began to move, not walking, not stepping. It leaned forward, its torso extending while its lower half remained rooted. The distance between us shortened without its feet advancing. I heard a soft internal sliding, like wet fabric pulled over bone. Its face lowered toward mine, eyes unblinking. I held my ground. If I ran, the rancher would run. If he ran, the herd would scatter. The tapping above us stopped. In its place came a faint whistling, thin and wavering, descending from the ceiling beams, like breath through a narrow reed. The rancher flinched at the sound. The cattle outside responded instantly, their hooves shifting in anxious rhythm. The elongated figure's nostrils widened slightly, though I saw no inhale. Then its skin rippled, not dramatically, just a subtle wave beneath the surface, as if something beneath it adjusted position. The face softened, smoothed, the spacing of the eyes corrected itself, the jaw lifted into a natural alignment. In seconds, it stood there wearing a nearly perfect copy of the rancher. The only flaw was the stillness. No micro-movements, no breath fogging in the cold air. I became aware of a new sensation. The silence itself had weight. It pressed gently against my ears, dulling the edges of sound. Even my own breathing felt distant. The copy stepped forward at last. 1 foot lifted, then set down. But there was no crunch of hay, no shift of dirt. It placed its weight without disturbing the ground. The real rancher stumbled backward, brushing against my shoulder. "What do we do?" he asked, voice thin and fraying. The copy's lips curved faintly upward, not quite a smile. Then both versions of the rancher spoke at the same time, the same tone, the same flat calm. "Stay," they said together, and I realized I could no longer tell which one had moved first.
The words settled between us like ash. Stay, soft, even, final. I felt my pulse in my throat, slow but heavy, each beat pressing against reason. I did not look from one to the other too quickly. Sudden choices felt dangerous now. The real rancher, if he was the real one, stood slightly behind my left shoulder. The copy stood in the stall, one silent step forward from where it had been. The distance between them was small enough that my mind began to blur the edges. I focused on breath. The man behind me inhaled unevenly, air catching faintly in his chest. The one ahead of me did not breathe at all. I held on to that. I let it anchor me. "Walk backward," I said quietly, not turning, slow. The rancher behind me obeyed. I heard the soft grind of his heel in gravel. The copy watched without blinking. Its eyes followed the movement, but its head remained perfectly still, as though the neck were ornamental. The whistling above us returned, softer now, barely audible, like wind slipping through a narrow seam. The smell inside the barn shifted again. The coppery scent deepened, threaded with something damp and animal, like hide left in shade too long. My tongue felt dry.
The copy took another step forward. Again, no sound from the floor. Its boots did not compress hay. They did not leave an impression. I glanced down instinctively at its feet. For a fraction of a second, they appeared wrong, too narrow at the heel, elongated at the front. Then they softened back into familiar leather. A trick of light, I told myself, but the memory of the tracks outside slid cold through my thoughts. The rancher behind me reached the open barn door. Cool evening air brushed my back, bringing with it the scent of dust and livestock, steadier and real. I wanted that air. I wanted open sky. The copy's lips parted again. No immediate sound came out. Instead, I heard the zippering noise once more, but this time it came from the copy's throat. Slow, measured, as if something inside it were adjusting a seam. My stomach tightened. The skin along its jaw shifted slightly, not tearing, not splitting, just sliding. A faint misalignment along the cheek smoothed itself, as though pulled from within. The whistling above us stopped abruptly. In its place came a single heavy thud from the roof, not loud, just final. Dust rained down in a brief, pale veil. I felt a sudden drop in pressure in my ears, like descending too quickly in elevation. The rancher behind me whispered, "It's in the ceiling." I did not answer, because the copy inside the stall had not looked up at the sound. It was still watching me, only me. And slowly, deliberately, it began to raise its arms, not outward, not toward me, but upward, bending at angles that did not follow bone, palms turning until they faced the rafters, as if waiting for something above to lower itself down.
I did not look up right away. I kept my eyes on the copy as its arms continued to rise, joints bending with that faint internal sliding sound, soft and moist, like canvas easing over wet wood. Its palms faced the rafters, fingers lengthening subtly as they stretched, as though the bones within were softening to accommodate the reach. The real rancher's breath trembled behind me, warm against the back of my neck, grounding and human. I held on to that warmth. I let it steady the low swell of instinct telling me to run. The barn air thickened again, heavier in my lungs, and I became aware of a faint sweetness beneath the coppery scent, something like sap warming too long in sun. The copy's fingertips brushed the beams. There was no strain in the movement, no extension of shoulder or spine. The rafters seemed closer now, as if the ceiling had lowered to meet it. I felt a cool draft slide down from above, washing over my scalp and into my collar. It carried a damp mineral odor, like stone pressed beneath still water. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. The beams looked unchanged at first glance. Old wood, nails rusted along the seams. But between two rafters, where shadow pooled deepest, something pale was pressed flat against the ceiling. Not hanging, not crouched, pressed upward, as though gravity did not apply in the same direction for it. The shape was long and thin, limbs folded inward like a resting insect, though far larger. Its head turned sideways along the beam, face angled down toward us, toward me. The copy below kept its arms raised in silent offering. The thing on the ceiling shifted slightly, and I heard a faint clicking ripple through the wood, as though multiple joints adjusted at once. The temperature dropped sharply, enough that I saw my breath plume white in front of me. The rancher behind me whispered something under his breath, but the words dissolved into the thick air. The thing above opened its mouth. No sound emerged at first. Then, softly, from somewhere between the beams, I heard the low rhythmic tapping again. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. This time, it echoed through the entire structure, vibrating down the posts into the floor beneath my boots. The copy in the stall lowered its arms slowly, as if its purpose was complete. Its head tilted upward, mirroring the angle of the one above. For a brief, sickening moment, I realized the proportions were identical. Same elongated limbs, same narrow torso, same too wide spacing of eyes. The one above was not separate, it was the rest of it. The lower body had been standing in the stall, the upper half had been waiting along the ceiling. And as I watched, the torso on the floor began to stretch upward, spine lengthening in smooth increments, rising to meet the pale mass above. No tearing, no rupture, just a seamless extension, like two ends of something long and flexible reconnecting. The rancher's hand clutched my sleeve. "That's not possible," he breathed. I did not answer him, because as the two halves joined, the entire structure of the barn gave a low, settling groan, and I realized the walls were no longer as far apart as they had been when I first walked in.
The walls had shifted inward. Not visibly at first, no sudden collapse, no splintering wood, but the space felt narrower, the air denser against my skin. I measured it instinctively, the way I measured trail width or tree spacing without thinking. The distance between stalls had lessened by inches. The doorway behind me felt tighter around my shoulders. I did not remember it being so close. The joined shape now stood complete before us, a single elongated figure stretching from floor to ceiling with no visible seam. Its spine no longer bent at impossible angles. It flowed in one continuous curve, subtle and wrong. The rafters above looked higher again, as if accommodating its full height. The geometry of the barn was softening, adjusting around it, like damp wood warping in humidity. I heard a faint settling hiss, like air slowly escaping from somewhere unseen. The rancher's grip tightened on my sleeve. His palm was slick with sweat, real and warm. That warmth anchored me for a breath. "We leave," I said quietly. Not a question. A slow, careful step backward brought my heel to the threshold. The evening air outside felt thinner now, distant somehow, as though separated by more than a doorway. The joined figure lowered its head slightly, regarding me with those two wide eyes. No hostility, no rush, just attention. Its mouth opened again, but instead of words, I heard my own voice echo softly from within it. "We leave," it repeated. Perfect tone, perfect cadence. The sound did not bounce off the walls, it seemed absorbed by them. The coppery scent deepened abruptly, threaded with something sweet and spoiled, like fruit left sealed in heat. My stomach tightened. The herd outside began to low in uneasy unison, a deep, wavering chorus that vibrated faintly through the barn floor. The creature's arms shifted, not outward toward us, but sideways, palms grazing the inner walls. As its fingers touched the boards, I heard a subtle sliding, and the wood responded. The walls leaned inward another fraction, posts bending without cracking. The space shrank perceptibly now. The rancher gasped. I stepped backward fully into the doorway and felt resistance, not physical, but spatial. The threshold seemed thicker, elongated. The outside clearing no longer looked as wide. The tree line appeared closer than it had minutes ago. A faint smell of ozone returned, sharp and misplaced. The creature took a step forward. This time I heard it, not a footfall, but a low, wet compression, as though weight settled through something softer than earth. The floor beneath it darkened slightly, boards absorbing a thin sheen of moisture that had not been there before. I raised my radio again. Static answered me, no signal. The creature tilted its head and whispered once more in my voice, softer now. "Stay." The rancher stumbled backward into the yard, nearly pulling me with him. As my boots crossed fully outside, I looked back into the barn. The interior seemed deeper than before, stretched unnaturally long, the far wall receding into dim distance. The creature stood centered within that lengthened space, taller now than the rafters should allow, and I realized the barn had not shrunk around it. The land itself was folding inward, gently, patiently, drawing us closer no matter which direction we chose.
The yard did not feel like open ground anymore. When my boots settled fully into the gravel, the clearing seemed shallow, as though the tree line had inhaled and stepped closer while I was inside. The barn behind me stretched long and dim, its doorway now a narrow mouth of shadow. The joined figure remained within it, centered and still, but its proportions no longer matched the frame. It looked taller than the structure, yet the roofline held steady. My mind tried to reconcile that contradiction and failed. The rancher staggered a few steps farther into the yard, turning in a slow circle, as if orientation itself had loosened. "The trees," he whispered. I followed his gaze. The spruce at the northern fence leaned inward slightly, their upper branches weaving together in a way I did not remember. The fence posts along that edge angled subtly toward the barn, as if gravity had shifted direction. A low warmth brushed across my face, thin and dry, carrying with it the scent of dust and something faintly sweet, like sap thinning in heat. It did not match the cool evening light. I listened for insects, for wind, for any ordinary sound to anchor me. There was only a soft internal pressure in my ears, like descending too slowly underwater. Then the whistling began again, not from the barn this time, but from the tree line itself. It moved along the perimeter in a smooth arc, circling us. Not wind. The pitch remained constant, breathless and even. The cattle responded with a ripple of motion, pressing together near the southern fence. Their bodies formed a tight mass, heads lowered, eyes wide and white-rimmed. I felt the rancher's shoulder brush mine as he leaned closer. His breathing was shallow now, controlled in that fragile way people breathe when panic waits just beneath the surface. "It's hurting us," he said softly. I did not answer immediately, because the joined figure stepped out of the barn. One slow movement. This time its foot compressed gravel audibly, a damp, weighted sound that lingered. It did not rush, it did not chase, it simply emerged and stood between us and the doorway, elongating subtly as it adjusted to open air. Its skin reflected the fading light in a faint, slick sheen, like wet canvas stretched thin. The whistling stopped abruptly. In its place came the rhythmic tapping again. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. But now the sound carried from beneath the ground. I felt it through my soles, a dull vibration traveling up through bone. The gravel shifted faintly under my boots, settling in small concentric ripples around us. The rancher swayed. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. I did. The land itself felt softer, less stable, as if the surface were only a thin crust over something pliant. The joined figure tilted its head, studying us with patient curiosity. Then, in a voice that was neither mine nor the rancher's, but something flattened between them, it spoke softly. "This is the pasture." The words hung in the air, wrong in their calm certainty. I turned slowly toward the southern fence. The cattle were gone. The pasture beyond was empty, and where the herd had stood seconds before, the grass lay pressed flat in a wide, perfect circle.
The circle in the grass was too precise to belong to panic. The blades lay smooth in a flawless ring, each one pressed in the same direction, spiraled gently toward the center as if guided by careful hands. No hoof marks, no churned soil. The scent rising from that flattened space was sharp and green, freshly bruised vegetation layered over that faint metallic sweetness. I stepped toward it before I realized I had moved. The rancher caught my sleeve but did not try to stop me fully. His touch trembled. The joined figure remained near the barn, unmoving, its attention resting on my back like a physical weight. The air in the clearing felt thinner now, each breath sliding shallow into my lungs. I crossed the yard slowly, boots sinking a fraction deeper into the soil than they had earlier. The ground felt softer, almost elastic. When I reached the edge of the circle, I crouched and ran my fingers lightly over the pressed grass. It was warm, not sun-warmed, internally warm, as though something had rested there recently and left heat behind. A faint vibration lingered beneath the surface, subtle but steady. The tapping pattern returned, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. But this time it did not echo through wood or earth. It pulsed faintly through the grass itself. I leaned closer despite the slow rise of dread along my spine. In the exact center of the circle, the blades parted slightly, not pushed aside, separated with care. Beneath them, the soil was darker, moist in a way that did not match the surrounding ground. I smelled copper again, stronger now, not pooled, not spilled, just present. My mind reached for animal explanation, predator crouch, herd compression, atmospheric anomaly, but nothing accounted for the symmetry. The rancher called my name softly behind me, his voice unsteady. I did not turn yet. I pressed my palm gently into the darker soil at the center. It yielded too easily. Warm, almost pliant. Then, beneath my hand, something shifted. Not dramatically, just a subtle adjustment, like muscle tightening under skin. I pulled my hand back slowly. The surface stilled at once. The vibration ceased. The circle remained perfect. A cool breeze brushed across my shoulders from the north, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant water, clean and grounding. I inhaled it deeply, clinging to that clarity. When I stood and turned back toward the barn, the joined figure was no longer there. The doorway stood empty, interior dim and lengthened beyond reason. The rancher stood alone near the gravel drive, staring at me with wide, hollow eyes. "Where did it go?" he whispered. I opened my mouth to answer him, but from directly behind me, from the exact center of the circle, I heard my own voice speak softly. "I'm still here."
I did not spin around. Every nerve in me demanded it, a sharp surge climbing my spine, but I held still at the edge of the circle and let the silence settle first. My own voice had come from behind me, perfectly measured, calm and low. No strain, no breath, just the shape of my tone laid gently over the grass. The rancher's boots shifted faintly in the gravel. I heard the small slide of stone under leather, real and grounding. I focused on that sound. The air around the circle felt warmer now, subtly humid, as though the soil beneath were exhaling. I could smell crushed green blades and that faint metallic sweetness layered together into something almost syrupy. "Don't move," I said softly to the rancher, though my throat felt tight around the words. Then I turned, slowly. The circle remained undisturbed. No figure stood there. No visible form rose from the soil. But the center had deepened slightly, the dark patch widening into a shallow depression. The grass around it leaned inward, tips brushing the edge as if drawn by static. I took one careful step closer. The ground yielded under my boot, not sinking dramatically, just softer than it should have been. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, though the air remained warm against my skin. That contradiction pressed against my thoughts, unraveling them. Then the surface of the depression shifted again. This time I saw it clearly, a subtle ripple traveling beneath the soil, like something large turning over just under the crust. The grass trembled in a perfect ring as the ripple passed. My pulse thudded heavily in my ears. I wanted to step back. I did not. The rancher whispered my name again, thinner now. I raised one hand behind me slightly, signaling him to stay. The soil at the center parted without tearing. It simply opened, edges folding inward with a damp, sliding sound. From within, I saw pale texture. Not bone, not hide, something smoother. It pressed gently upward, testing the boundary. The zippering noise began again, soft and deliberate, emanating from below ground this time. The sound traveled up through my boots, faint vibrations along my soles. A cool draft rose from the opening, carrying the scent of stone and something old, like air sealed away for seasons. Then I saw it, my own hand emerging slowly from the earth. Same glove, same ranger patch along the wrist. The fingers flexed once, testing air. Dirt slid from the knuckles in thin streams. I felt my stomach tighten into a hollow ache. The hand reached upward, palm open, mirroring the way I had lifted mine moments ago. I stared at it, unable to look away. My own sleeve followed, rising inch by inch from the earth without resistance. No tearing, no collapse, just smooth emergence. The rancher gasped behind me. I could hear his breathing unravel. The duplicate arm continued to rise, elbow bending naturally, perfectly proportioned. And then, as the shoulder began to surface, I felt a sudden pressure against my own back. Soft, cool fingertips resting gently between my shoulder blades, exactly where my spine curves inward. The voice came again, close to my ear this time. My voice, soft and steady. "You're standing on me."
The fingertips between my shoulder blades did not press harder, they simply rested there, cool and deliberate, as if waiting for me to acknowledge them. I did not turn. I did not step forward. The duplicate arm continued rising from the circle in front of me, elbow clearing the soil, sleeve perfectly clean despite emerging from earth. The two sensations, the hand beneath the ground and the hand at my back, overlapped in my mind until my sense of direction blurred. I focused on breath. Inhale, slow. Exhale, slow. The air near my face felt warm and damp, yet the fingers at my spine were cold enough to sting lightly through fabric. The rancher made a low sound in his throat, something between a whisper and a sob. I heard him take a step backward. Gravel shifted. Real, ordinary. I clung to that. "Don't run," I said quietly, though my voice felt distant in my own ears. The fingertips slid slightly upward along my spine, not gripping, just tracing the line of bone beneath cloth, as if mapping it. The zippering sound softened to a faint murmur beneath my boots. In front of me, my duplicate shoulder surfaced fully from the soil. The neck followed, skin smooth, unmarked. It did not strain to rise. The earth yielded around it like loose sand in water. I saw my own jawline emerge next, chin lifting toward open air. Its eyes remained closed, its expression calm. The depression in the grass widened further, edges folding inward with quiet precision. A cool draft spiraled up from the opening, carrying a scent of deep stone and something faintly sweet, like sap long sealed. The hand at my back moved higher still, resting now at the base of my neck. I felt the light brush of fingertips along my hairline. "You're misaligned," my voice whispered softly near my ear. Not from the circle, from directly behind me. The tone was gentle, almost instructional. My duplicate's face broke the surface fully, soil sliding from its brow without leaving a trace. Its eyelids fluttered once, then opened. The eyes were mine, same color, same faint crease at the outer corners. They focused on me with quiet appraisal. Then the mouth curved slightly upward, not a smile, just recognition. The hand at my neck shifted, thumb pressing lightly beneath my jaw as if testing the hinge.
I felt my head tilt involuntarily to the side. Not far, just enough. The rancher whimpered softly behind me. I could hear the uneven rhythm of his breathing. "Ranger," he said, voice unraveling. I wanted to answer him, but my duplicate in the soil raised its other hand slowly, mirroring the position of the one touching my neck. The two gestures aligned perfectly, and as the copy began to rise further from the earth, torso lifting smoothly, spine unfolding, I felt a subtle shift beneath my boots. The ground was no longer solid. It felt layered, like standing on stretched hide over something hollow. The duplicate's lips parted. My lips parted in the same moment, and in a voice that was both mine and not mine at all, we spoke together softly. "There are only so many shapes this land allows."
The words seemed to settle into the clearing like fine dust, light but impossible to brush away. There are only so many shapes this land allows. My duplicate continued to rise from the circle with unhurried grace, soil folding inward around its waist, then smoothing flat as though it had never been disturbed. The hand at my neck remained steady, thumb resting beneath my jaw, fingers cool along the hinge. I felt my head tilt a fraction farther to the side without intending to move. Not forced, guided. The rancher stumbled backward again. I heard the faint scrape of his boot catching on gravel, followed by the soft thud of him steadying himself against the side of the truck. His breathing had grown loud and uneven, the fragile rhythm of someone close to breaking. The duplicate's torso cleared the earth completely. It stood now within the circle, boots resting lightly on pressed grass that did not bend under its weight. Its posture mirrored mine precisely, same slight lean, same angle of shoulders. The only difference was the stillness in its eyes. No blink, no flicker. The hand at my neck slid down slowly to rest over my sternum. I felt no pressure, yet a faint vibration pulsed beneath its palm, matching the earlier tapping rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. The ground beneath my boots answered faintly in response. The air grew heavier, saturated with that copper-sweet scent, layered over crushed green. I swallowed carefully, throat tight. "Step away from me," I said softly to the space behind me, though I could not tell whether I addressed the thing or myself. The hand did not withdraw. Instead, the duplicate inside the circle took a single step forward. This time the grass flattened beneath its boot, but not outward, downward, compressing into the soil as though absorbed. I felt the surface beneath me sag slightly in sympathy. My balance shifted. The rancher's voice came thin and desperate. "You're sinking!" I looked down. The circle had expanded subtly around my boots. The pressed grass now formed a wider ring, edges creeping outward in a smooth, deliberate crawl. My heels rested closer to its center than I remembered. The duplicate raised its right hand slowly. I felt my own arm respond, lifting without conscious decision. The movement was not violent. It was aligned, harmonized. "Misaligned shapes cause strain," my voice whispered near my ear again, soft and patient. The duplicate's fingers brushed the air inches from mine. When they touched, there was no jolt, no flash, only a subtle warmth spreading through my palm, as if two identical surfaces had finally met. The hand at my chest pressed gently once, not forceful, just enough to feel the alignment of bone beneath skin. The rancher made a small, strangled sound. I tore my gaze from the duplicate long enough to look at him. His outline wavered faintly against the trees, as though heat rose between us. The tree line behind him leaned inward another fraction. The clearing felt smaller still. When I looked back at the duplicate, its expression had shifted, not hostile, not pleased, simply settled. And I realized with quiet, cold clarity that it was not trying to replace me. It was trying to correct me.
Correct me. The thought moved slowly through my mind, heavy and deliberate. The duplicate's fingers remained against mine, warm now, not cold, the temperature gradually matching my own skin, as if calibrating. The hand at my chest traced lightly downward along my sternum, following the line of bone with quiet attention. I felt no pain, only a subtle pressure, like something measuring depth. The circle beneath us widened another inch, grass folding inward in smooth submission. The rancher's breathing had become ragged behind me. I could hear him whispering to himself, low and repetitive, as if reciting something familiar might hold the world in place. The duplicate tilted its head slightly, studying my posture. I felt my own spine respond, straightening subtly without conscious effort. A faint series of internal clicks echoed from somewhere beneath the ground, not loud, just soft adjustments. The vibration under my boots resumed, 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, steady and patient. The air cooled abruptly, enough that gooseflesh rose along my forearms. The coppery sweetness thinned, replaced by the mineral scent of deep soil and something older, sealed away from light. Strain causes fracture, my voice whispered again near my ear. The hand at my chest pressed more firmly this time, not crushing, but aligning. I felt my shoulders roll back slightly, my chin lifted. The duplicate mirrored the movement perfectly. For a moment, the pressure in my ears eased, as if something in the air had balanced. The rancher suddenly cried out. I turned my eyes toward him without moving my head. He was no longer standing where he had been. The truck behind him seemed closer to the tree line, and the trees themselves appeared taller, their trunks narrowing upward into unnatural height. He stumbled forward into the clearing, but his steps covered less ground than they should have. The space between us stretched, subtly elongating. The duplicate's grip tightened around my fingers, not painful, just decisive. The circle beneath us deepened slightly, the soil sinking inward like a shallow bowl. I felt the ground tilt towards its center. You are slightly offset, the voice near my ear continued, calm and analytical. This land resists offset forms. The duplicate stepped closer until only inches separated us. I could see every detail of my own face reflected there. Faint scar along the jawline, subtle crease near the brow. But its eyes held no fear, no doubt, only purpose. The hand behind me slid upward once more, fingers resting lightly along the base of my skull. I felt my head guided a fraction to the right. My vision sharpened oddly, edges clarifying, as though focus had been corrected. The vibration beneath us intensified slightly. The rancher screamed my name, but his voice sounded distant, stretched thin. The duplicate leaned forward, forehead nearly touching mine, and in a tone so soft it barely stirred the air, it said, "When alignment completes, the strain will cease."
The instant our foreheads touched, the vibration beneath the clearing stopped completely. Silence fell so abruptly it felt like a physical drop in pressure. Even the wind beyond the tree line halted mid-gust. I could still see the rancher moving, still hear his voice in the distance, but the sound arrived dulled and stretched, like it had traveled through deep water. The duplicate's skin felt warmer now, indistinguishable from mine. Its breath matched my own inhalations precisely, the rhythm syncing so tightly I could no longer tell which chest rose first. The hand at the base of my skull pressed slightly, tilting my vision another fraction. The world sharpened again, the trees straightened, The truck behind the rancher snapped back into proper proportion. The space between us contracted to its natural depth. I felt something in my spine settle with a faint internal pop, painless but final. The circle beneath our boots stopped sinking. Grass along its rim began to lift slowly, blades uncurling upright as if released from tension. "Correction in progress," the duplicate murmured, though its lips barely moved. I felt the words vibrate behind my eyes rather than pass through my ears. The rancher stumbled forward into the clearing, and this time his steps covered the right amount of ground. His breathing no longer echoed strangely. The coppery scent in the air dissipated, replaced by the clean chill of early dawn. The first gray hint of morning filtered through the canopy. The duplicate withdrew the hand from my chest, but our fingers remained locked. Its eyes searched mine carefully. I sensed a question in that gaze, not of emotion, but of calibration. I inhaled slowly and resisted the instinct to pull away. My heart rate had slowed, matching its steady cadence. The faint clicks beneath the soil resumed once, one final adjustment, then ceased entirely. The grass in the center of the circle stood fully upright again, no depression remaining. The only evidence of disturbance was the absence of frost where our boots had been. "Alignment stabilized," the voice whispered faintly, almost satisfied. The pressure at the base of my skull lifted. I felt lighter, as if a constant background strain I had never noticed had quietly dissolved. The duplicate finally loosened its grip. Our hands separated with no resistance. It did not step back. It simply remained inches away, studying my face one last time. Then, slowly, it mirrored my posture. Same stance, same angle of shoulders, and began to lean away, not stepping backward, but thinning. Its outline shimmered like heat haze. The features of my face wavered, blending with the air around it. The rancher reached the edge of the circle and stopped abruptly, eyes wide, but no longer distorted by spatial warping. "Ranger?" he asked hoarsely. I did not look away from the dissolving figure. The duplicate's eyes were the last to fade. For a brief moment, they held a faint reflection of the clearing, perfectly centered, perfectly still. Then it was gone. No burst, no sound, just absence. The woods exhaled. Wind returned gently through the branches. A bird called hesitantly from somewhere deeper in the trees. The rancher stepped fully into the circle. "What just happened?" he whispered. I looked down at the grass. It showed no sign of disturbance, but the forest felt different now, balanced in a way it hadn't been before. And somewhere beneath the soil, far below where roots reached, something had finished adjusting.
Dawn settled fully over the clearing, pale gold filtering through the high branches and washing the frost in muted light. The rancher stood beside me, still breathing hard, hat clutched tight against his chest. His eyes searched the circle again and again, as if expecting the duplicate to step back into existence. Nothing moved except the wind through the pine needles. The ground beneath our boots felt solid, ordinary, but ordinary in a way that seemed newly established, like a structure that had just been reinforced. "It's over?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I crouched and pressed my palm flat against the soil at the center of the clearing. It was cold, but not unnaturally so. No vibration, no clicks, no pulse beneath the surface, just packed earth and root systems resting in silence. The coppery sweetness that had lingered in the air for days was gone completely. Even the faint metallic taste at the back of my throat had disappeared. I rose slowly and turned a full circle, studying the tree line. The trunks no longer leaned inward at impossible angles.
The shadows fell clean and consistent. Space behaved the way it should. "Something was correcting," I said finally. My voice sounded steady, grounded. The rancher frowned. "Correcting what?" I glanced toward the direction of his ranch, miles deeper into the forest. "Pressure," I replied. "Strain in the land, maybe in us." He swallowed and looked down at his boots. "It was wear in your face." I nodded once. It wasn't wearing anything. We walked back toward his truck together, boots crunching softly over frost. Each step felt normal, distance reliable, weight consistent. I kept listening for that three-pulse rhythm in the earth, but it never returned. Birds resumed their morning chatter overhead. Somewhere far off, a deer moved through brush. The woods were alive again, but not agitated, balanced. The rancher paused by his truck door. "My cattle," he said. "They'll be fine now?" I considered the question. The previous days had seen fences bending inward without pressure, hoofprints overlapping themselves impossibly, livestock staring at empty corners of pasture as if watching something recalibrate the horizon. "Check your north field first. If the ground there holds steady, the rest will too." He nodded, still uneasy, but calmer than before. He climbed into the truck and started the engine. It turned over cleanly on the first try, no hesitation, no distortion in sound. I stepped back as he pulled away, tires carving steady tracks through frost. I remained in the clearing alone. Sunlight reached the center fully now. The circle where everything had occurred looked indistinguishable from the surrounding forest floor, but I could feel the memory of it beneath my boots, not as fear, not as threat, but as something resolved, a subtle absence of tension. I exhaled slowly. Whatever had mirrored me had not come to hunt, it had come to align, and now that alignment was complete. The woods stood quiet, as if an unseen equation had finally balanced itself deep beneath the roots.
3 days passed without incident, and that in itself felt unnatural. I made my patrols along the northern boundary, checked the ravine where the trees had once leaned at impossible angles, and walked the fence line near the rancher's property. Every measurement held. Distances remained consistent. My compass no longer twitched. Even the subtle unease that had lived in my chest since the first report of missing cattle had dissolved into a steady, grounded awareness. The rancher reported no new disturbances. His herd stopped bunching at the tree line. The north field, which had once seemed subtly tilted toward the forest as if gravity favored the woods, now lay flat and honest under the sun. But on the fourth morning, just before dawn, I felt something shift, not beneath the ground, but within myself. It wasn't pain, it wasn't pressure, it was awareness. I woke before my alarm, sitting upright in the ranger cabin with the distinct sensation that something had completed a long calculation. The air in the room felt balanced in a way I couldn't explain, my heartbeat steady, my breathing even. Outside, the woods were silent, not ominous silence, but a pause. I stepped onto the porch and looked toward the eastern ridge. The horizon held a faint band of light, and for a moment I saw the forest not as trees and soil, but as a structure, roots interlaced like neural pathways, stone layered with quiet tension, wind threading through canopy in predictable currents. Everything aligned. I closed my eyes and listened. No three-pulse vibration, no internal clicks, just the low hum of a living ecosystem operating without strain. But as I stood there, I realized something subtle. I no longer felt slightly off-center within it. For years, even before the rancher's trouble, I had carried a faint sense of displacement, like a man standing half an inch to the left of where he belonged. I had assumed that feeling was normal. Now it was gone. The woods had corrected more than soil and space. They had corrected me. Footsteps approached along the path. I opened my eyes to see the rancher walking up the trail, hat in hand, posture easier than I had ever seen it. "Figured I'd check in," he said. "Haven't slept this good in months." I nodded slowly. "It's stable." He studied my face. "You look different." I almost smiled. "Aligned." He let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "Whatever it was," he said, glancing toward the deep woods, "it ain't coming back, is it?" I looked at the trees carefully. The canopy shifted in the rising light. Nothing distorted, nothing leaned. "No," I said after a moment. "It finished." He nodded, satisfied enough, and turned back down the trail toward his ranch. I remained on the porch as sunlight finally broke across the ridge. And in that light, I understood something clearly. What had worn my face had not been a predator. It had been a mechanism, ancient and patient, responding to imbalance the way a body responds to infection. The land had corrected itself through reflection, and now there was nothing left to fix. Only one final acknowledgement remained.
The final acknowledgement came at dusk. I felt it before I saw anything change. The air carried a faint stillness, not heavy or distorted, just deliberate. I left the cabin and walked back to the clearing alone, boots pressing into soil that now felt unquestionably solid. The sky burned low orange behind the treetops, shadows stretching long and clean across the forest floor. When I reached the center of the clearing, I stopped where the circle had once formed. There was no visible mark, no depression, no scar in the grass, but I knew the exact point. I stood there quietly and let the silence settle around me. The woods did not lean inward, the ground did not pulse, yet something was present, not as a figure, not as a mirror, but as attention. I inhaled slowly and spoke into the open air. "It's stable." The words felt unnecessary, but important. The wind stirred faintly through the canopy, a soft ripple passing branch to branch like a distant exhale. I waited. The light dimmed another shade. For a brief moment, just at the edge of my vision, I sensed alignment, not of posture or bone, but of awareness, as if something vast and buried far beneath the roots registered my presence and measured it one last time. I felt no hand at my chest this time, no fingers at my skull. Instead, there was a subtle internal shift, like the quiet settling of a structure after the final beam locks into place. My balance adjusted half a fraction. My breathing deepened naturally. The sensation lasted only seconds, then it was gone. The forest resumed its ordinary evening rhythm. Insects began their chorus. A bird launched from a nearby tree, wings beating sharply against the cooling air. The last band of sunlight slipped below the horizon. Whatever mechanism had risen to correct the strain had completed its task entirely. It did not linger for thanks. It did not leave a warning. It simply ceased activity because there was no longer imbalance to address. I stood in the darkening clearing for several minutes more, just to be certain. Nothing distorted, nothing recalibrated. The woods felt vast, quiet, and whole. Finally, I turned and began the walk back to the cabin. Each step fell exactly where I intended. Distance behaved. Sound traveled cleanly. When I reached the porch, I paused and looked once more toward the deeper forest where the ranch lay beyond the trees. No flicker of movement, no second silhouette, only a healthy stretch of land breathing evenly under the night sky. I understood then that my role had never been to fight a creature or drive it away. I had simply been present during correction, a fixed point in a shifting equation.
The woods would endure long after I was gone, adjusting when necessary, silent and patient. And if strain ever returned, if imbalance...